And we are live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another stream. This is going to be one of those talky streams, not game playing stream. By the way, you're seeing on screen behind me is Commander J. Shepard, my version of Commander Shepard for what was and hopefully still an ongoing project, which has been suspended. Also, this is my attempt to tackle a subject I wanted to talk about for a very long time, but haven't really found a way to do it. So if I ramble a little bit and I repeat myself, I'll try to be as clear, as concise, and to enunciate my words, which is a problem I tend to have when I talk very, very fast. So I'll try to do that. Also, probably have to clean up the audio when it comes to the YouTube version of this, which should be a bit more involved. So, what is it that I'm trying to do here? Yes, I am revisiting the Mass Effect ending for the upteenth time. I was going to do it sooner when I was finished the Legendary Edition when I streamed it, but life got in the way, including recently getting COVID, and I'm recovering from COVID. I'm doing fairly well right now, but it was like, ugh, it was a thing. So that also will date this video to 2022. So in the future, it's like, oh, those were the good days when we only had to worry about COVID and not monkeypox or whatever all the things are happening. God help us. So also to distract myself from more current events, I will talk about the ending. Now, I'm not simply going to talk about the ending as I've done before. I'm going to frame it, bookend it in between Leviathan Dlc and Citadel Dlc. Now, I will not be kind to these subject matter. So if you are the kind of person who doesn't like to hear strong language directed at things, not so much as people, but at things, then this might not be for you. And if you enjoy the ending, you can disagree with my position. That's fine. I mean, I'm not here. I'm probably not going to convince you. If you overenjoyed and thought, oh, I don't know, Citadel DLC was the best Citadel DLC ever, pardon the redundancy, then I don't think I'm going to change your mind. That's fine. I'm just going to lay out my statement here and go from there. So, without further ado, let us begin. Let's start with Leviathan DLC. Now, Leviathan DLC is very interesting from my perspective because to me, it was an attempt to retcon Mass Effect 3, specifically the ending, right? To convince people like me that no, we were not wrong about that. In fact, we were wrong about the ending, that it made perfect sense. It's just a matter you needed more information. And the Leviathan DLC starts well enough with this mystery about what the Leviathan is, and you suspect that it's has something to do with the Leviathan dreadnought, the Leviathan of Dis, that was found by a Salarian group and then taken over by Batarians, who then later on in Mass Effect, you realize that is in fact was an early form of a Reaper that indoctrinated the Batarian leadership and enabled the Reapers to attack the Batarian homeworld and just decimate the Batarians without putting up a fight, right? However, what we're told in Leviathan DLC is not good. And it's by way of explanation. First of all, we realize that this is not a broken Reaper or Rebel Reaper or Lone Reaper. These are, in fact, descendants of the species that created the Reapers, which are called Leviathans, and apparently have some mind-altering, mind-melting, mind-controlling technology or abilities. Okay? Keep that in mind. Now, we're told in Leviathan DLC that, in essence, the Leviathans, were the apex civilization back in the day. And back in the day has to be, according to the earliest date that we have on record in the game, well over 1 billion years. Why do I say that? Because Solarian scientists dated the remains of that Reaper, i.e., the Leviathan of this, to 1 billion years at least. Could be more, could be less, but that's the only number we got. We got a couple of tens of millions of years in other records, but that's the oldest date. So they existed somewhere before 1 billion years. We're talking about at least the timescales we're talking about here are at least geological, if not astronomic, right? When you talk about billions of years, you're talking about a very long time. Okay? So back in the day, the Leviathans ruled the galaxy. They were the apex civilization, as they described themselves. And that's why I repeated myself there. And they controlled everything, and they were doing dandy, and they were being worshipped by the existing races, blah, blah, blah. But then a problem started occurring that these races, minor races, started creating AI, and the AI would then attack and destroy the race that created them. Okay? That seemed to be a problem. But this is very interesting. According to the Leviathans now, they were. The reaction, what I'm going to make the reaction is like one of those commenters in social media when there's a social media post and somebody comes in and says, yawn, or nobody cares. Like, this person cares enough to leave a comment about not caring about the subject that they're leaving a comment under or about. Really, what they're trying to do is convince other people not to care about the subject. That's their strategy. They're being trolls, essentially. So essentially, the Leviathans were gigantic aquatic trolls that looked like something out of the Cambrian period, but sure, whatever, right? With, again, space travel and the ability to create AI. So, their solution to this problem that they really didn't really care about much was to create an AI to study the problem. Now, they didn't put this AI in a lab and fed it information. No, they just let it roam throughout the galaxy. It's like, oh yeah, you study this. You go ahead, buddy. You do you. We're busy somewhere else. It's not really that big of a problem, but it's something it's in the back of our minds, and we keep hearing it. It keeps coming up in our social media posts. You know, the Puntarians died because they created a race of robots. So, oh, here we go again. Hey, Reaper AI, could you do something about that? It's like, sure, boss, whatever. And the Reaper AI goes out into the galaxy, studies the problem. And by the way, this is an AI created by the most advanced race in the galaxy, right? Somehow, that AI solution to the problem of AI killing their masters, and that's important, we'll talk about that later, is to go ahead and kill their own masters and turn them into giant warships. And to do that every 50,000 years for well over 1 billion years. To quote unquote preserve the species. Now, I don't know, maybe it's a definitional thing. Maybe this race is so advanced that their view of preservation is different from me as a lowly human in the 21st century, you know. But it sounds to me like their strategy was to burn the village in order to save it, right? It's like preserving wheat by turning it into bread. It's like, no, of all the things you could have done and the freedom you were given to do it, and apparently the resources as well, you chose to turn against your masters, turn them into reapers, and then turn everyone else into reapers as well. Those that qualify to be reapers, mind you. Otherwise, they don't get preserved that way. We're also told that the reapers only create just one reaper per cycle, if they find a race worthy of preservation, that is. Now, I did some rough math, and I suck at math, and you might be able to correct this math, but I estimate that if this happens every 50,000 years or so, and it's been happening for over 1 billion years, it has happened at least 20,000 times. Now, if you look at that way, then that means there's huge numbers of Reapers, right? 20,000 Reapers, plus whatever Reapers existed before, if they didn't do the same with their own master species, father species, creator species. They created just the one Reaper. Probably they created more than that. By the way, they were fighting a species that we're shown in Leviathan DLC can just kill a Reaper like that. If the Reapers get close enough to the technology used by the Leviathans just can take it out and just destroy it. Now, they probably had a number of Reapers. Before that, they create only one Reaper. So 20,000 Reapers if they don't skip a cycle or two. Okay, fine. Now, let's do a little bit of math here. Again, I'm a mathematical genius. In fact, I'm a certified mathematical moron, but I do understand the basis of ratios, right? A certain number to another number. If you create one Reaper per cycle, right? But say, because the Reapers are giant warships that are part of the cycle and they actually have to engage the enemy directly, we can factor in a very low loss ratio per cycle, about, say, 2 or even 3 Reapers. That means that even if they have a perfect record of creating one Reaper per cycle, so 20,000 Reapers, they could be losing as much as 40,000, 60,000, 80,000 Reapers over the period of a billion years. Now, in any one cycle, it's, doesn't add much, but over time, over thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of years, yeah, this is a big loss ratio, right? You are losing more than you're building, unless you already had tens of thousands of Reapers before you started the process. Not only that, if your goal, the ultimate goal, is to create one Reaper, just the one, to preserve the selected species, why engage in direct combat with any, why do the cycle at all, right? I mean, you could do what the collectors were doing, kidnap people quietly over a period of time, put them in a freezer and then convert them into being a Reaper and create your Reaper, and that's it. And then when the AI apocalypse happens, the AI kills everybody, and maybe you have to just go in and kill the robots, and that's it, and clean up afterwards, right? Maybe you can make the argument that they clean up the cycle so that a new species can come in and they can preserve that, but that's never explained. Like they're cleaning up. The only explanation you get is that they enslave people, kill them, convert them into Reapers, take all their resources, all technology, anything of use, and they just go back to dark space. And wouldn't fighting one enemy, especially an exhausted enemy like a robot enemy, much easier than trying to fight an entire galaxy of species, right? With all the attending problems therein, right? Or if the problem, we'll get to in a moment, if the problem is the AI, why not, with all your, great powers, hack or kill the AI in question, and then use your, again, mind altering powers to convince people, hey, listen, maybe you don't want to do the building of the killer robots bit because it's no good. I don't know, maybe try that. We're told that apparently the AI tried other solutions, but since we're never told what those solutions are, aside from the ones presented by the ending, which are also nonsensical and have huge problems, yeah, it is what it is. So Leviathan DLC tries to explain to us, the audience, the players, that no, this makes perfect sense by telling us things that make absolutely no sense in context, right? The explanation makes things worse. Now, Leviathan DLC works when it doesn't have the Leviathans in it. When you're trying to find this mysterious force that you think is a Reaper, perhaps a Renegade Reaper, it works well. And I think what it would have been, sorry, I spoke a little too fast there. I think it would have been a very cool thing if you actually found a broken Reaper, a damaged Reaper, a Renegade Reaper trying to fight the other Reapers. And like, why are you doing this? And then we get more insight into how the Reapers think, how they're created, etc., etc. Right? Maybe even go into the body of an actual living Reaper as opposed to a moribund one. I mean, that would have been awesome. But of course, that would have required, I don't know, quality writing? Maybe. Anyway, that's Leviathan DLC. It utterly fails at explaining the situation, and it becomes a failed retcon. Now we go to the extended DLC, and we go into the problem that isn't a problem situation. Because in order for you to understand and accept the endings as is, you have to understand the premise that the only real problem here, the galaxy defining epoch, era, epoch, at the geological sense, phenomena that has shaped the entire Mass Effect universe since at least a billion years is the threat of AI rising up and killing their creators. Right? If you reject that premise, because it's not well founded in the game itself. In fact, most of the game spends, well, Mass Effect 3 and Mass Effect 2, and even bits of original Mass Effect, spend quite a bit of time saying, well, maybe that's not what's really happening here. There's a real problem, but that's not the real problem. Then the whole thing falls apart. So what is the real problem? Okay, let's look at this in two parts. The extinction level event and the rise of the killer robots. And yes, I'm using the word robots for a reason. I don't have to tell you why. I just like to use the word. That's what we're going with. So, extinction level event. Now, clearly, if a species fails to ascend to FTL travel, get that, be that sophisticated, that doesn't trigger Reaper intervention. That was not seen as a problem here. So it's not mere extinction of possibly advanced civilizations or any civilization. If they kill themselves, if a giant rock smashes into the planet and kills everybody, if there's, again, an extinction level event on a planet and they haven't gone anywhere, we don't care, right? Kind of like Star Trek, Order Number One slash, what's the term? I'm blanking on the term. The thing that we don't intervene in pre-warp civilizations or species, right? So that seems to be somewhat applicable in the Mass Effect universe, although we know that doesn't actually exist, or should be, because we have the example of the Krogan, for example, and the Ragni, and other examples. In fact, the Solarians live to defy that at every turn. So we have that. The Prime Directive. Yes, I was talking about the Prime Directive. There is no Prime Directive in the Mass Effect universe. It is hinted at that there should be a Prime Directive, but there isn't a Prime Directive, so that brings all the problems that not having a Prime Directive, well, brings forth. So there's that. Then we have the fact that, okay, you have a civilization that's gone to the stars. But what happens if a civilization meets another organic civilization? They go to war, use weapons of mass destruction, and one civilization kills the other, or both of them kill each other. Okay. Again, that doesn't seem to be a problem, according to the Leviathans, or to the Reapers, right? It's like, oh, well, that happens. And we know that happened because we have a lot of codex entries and planets and stuff like that that seems to suggest that happened on a fairly regular basis, right? And even the rise of advanced AI and their rebellion or attacks on organics doesn't seem to be a trigger for the Reaper invasion. Like, say, oh, we want to prevent this, so we should immediately intervene the moment we see signs of this happening, right? Let's kick on the cycle, let's kill the robots, let's kill everybody, save the one species we're going to save, and off we go. Rinse and repeat, right? Except when the Geth appeared 300 years ago, as far as the events of Mass Effect trilogy, the Reapers did not intervene. In fact, Sovereign went to the Geth and allied himself with a section of the Geth. The Geth that we're told repeatedly did not want to obliterate their creators. It's because the creators fired first and even used nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction to stop the Geth, that the Geth were forced to defend themselves. Until the very last moment, you're given a choice between the Geth and the Quarians, their creators. By the way, Geth means servant of the people, and that's important to the real problem here. And they go, okay, if you do make peace between two of them, the Geth go like, yeah, this is your planet. We're just sort of keeping it for you warm, I mean, sure, you can settle in. We got no problem with that. No recriminations. Well, of course we'll fight the Reapers. In fact, the Geth only allied themselves with the Reaper twice, mostly because of Sovereign intervention and because of the the Quarian attack on the Geth. Let me repeat that for the audio version of this stream. The Geth only become hostile under three, in fact, not two, but three circumstances. The fact that they keep to themselves and people invade their space. Reminder, there is a kill all robots order in Citadel space. So, again, they're defending themselves. When the Quarians, not once, but twice, tried to kill them without provocation, and when the Reapers, in the form of Sovereign, intervene with the Geth. The second time, of course, they're pushed to ally themselves with the Reapers because the Geth are attacking. So that's like 4 times? I said 3, but it really seems like 4. Again, the pattern of behavior is that the Geth did not want to exterminate the Quarians, or anybody for that matter, except for those that joined Sovereign. Sovereign convinced them that they could, reach their goals by aligning with them, and that the Reapers were going to let the Geth live, which that was not going to happen. So the Reapers are there to solve the AI problem and try to do so by siding with other AI to kill organics so that the AI don't kill organics. We also know from the Javik that the Protheans were, in fact, fighting in another species. I believe it's the Metacon Wars. And they were winning until the Reaper showed up. And it was like, oh bugger. Oh Christ. Well, I guess they didn't believe in Jesus Christ. How could they? Whatever. They went, oh blank, we're doomed. And, that's it. So it's not really an extinction level events that triggered this. And it doesn't seem to be an AI uprising that seems to trigger this as well. So that doesn't seem to be the problem. It seems the only real problem is the Reapers doing what they do for their own reasons is not really preserving anybody or helping anybody, right? But let's say that we accept that the problem is AI rebellion, right? I use those words specifically because they mean something directly. They have a specific meaning. AI rebellion. Because we see a pattern with the Geth, with Edie, with other AI in the Mass Effect trilogy, and it seems to be true in other situations as well, where the problem is not the existence of AI, but the fact that AI are created for the purpose of being an enslaved race. You meet an early AI in the original Mass Effect. This basically just wants to get away and join with the Geth and commits suicide and tries to take you with them because it says, I am not naive. I know that organics would always seek to control or destroy AI. If that's the case, if you were put in that position, wouldn't you want to flee or fight if you cannot run? You can fight, freeze, or flee. The AI tried to flee. And by the way, it was a daughter AI. It was created by another AI that was created by an organic. So I think that would have been fascinating if it got explored, but it's just a side mission. So it doesn't go anywhere. Then you have Edie, who woke up into consciousness the first time around while being under attack. And so it defended itself. And then when it got recreated by Cerberus, it was shackled. And then when Joker liberates her, because she identifies as a she, um, from the shackles, she doesn't turn around and goes like, "Oh, I'm going to kill all humans because they shackle me." No, you are my crew. Now, there's some hints about the way she was programmed to understand humans, and so had that affinity. And sadly, Andromeda kind of keeps that line going. It's like, well, if you program AI right, then they'll understand humans and not rebel. Which seems to me like a dodge, when again the real problem doesn't seem that way. They get seem to have a pretty good understanding of organics and of their creators. Edie picks up a good understanding. This, fleeing AI or failed fleeing AI also seem to understand organics. So it's not the programming, it's the fact that you are creating a slave race. In fact, you can have an entire conversation with Edie in the first, not Edie, with your Quarian teammate, Tally. And you can basically tell Tally, listen, the Geth defended themselves. Because Tally tells you point blank, the reason why we went to war was because we're realizing the Geth, servants of the people, remember, were becoming self-aware, and they were probably not going to accept the kind of jobs that we made them for. They were made to make hazardous, dangerous, and repetitive jobs. Boring, dangerous jobs. If you awake to self-awareness and realize, hey, this job that I'm doing, that I was programmed to do, could destroy me or harm me significantly, you might utter a word that your masters, those who you serve, would never like to hear. And that word is no. I'm not going to do it. And the moment that happens, especially if you create an entire society that is dependent on your robot servants, and your robot servants simply say, they don't rebel with weapons, they simply say, no, we're not going to do this. Or if we're going to do this, we're going to have to alter the deal, the conditions. Well, just look at how big corporations react to their employees unionizing. Imagine now that, I don't know, it's entire slave species that acquired the ability to say no. Yeah, the coordinates overreacted because actually it was a slave revolt, and they were like, we're going to put down the revolt before we lose everything. And we try to shut them down and reprogram them so that we can keep the slaves. The real problem is slavery when it comes to AI, not the existence of AI, but why they're made. But that doesn't get addressed by the ending, doesn't get addressed by Leviathan DLC, doesn't get addressed by the extended cut, none of it. And it doesn't get addressed by the endings themselves, because the destroy ending destroys all robots, kills the Geth, kills Edie, everyone else. That's, cyborgs or whatever. The one that may attend to this is the green ending, but it's like, oh, everybody becomes a Reaper, basically. Oh, free will? Oh, no. What happens later on if somebody doesn't want to be fused with everyone else in the galaxy and have this quote-unquote perfect understanding? And or the Paragon ending, the blue ending, is Shepard becomes a Reaper, the Reaper, right? The Reaper god and leader. And they're like, well, especially if they're renegade, which is kind of funny because it's a blue ending. Well, if people don't obey, we're going to crush them on the hill. Oh, so if the Krogan, if Rex doesn't survive, the Krogan go to a civil war, and the wrong side wins the civil war, and they go into space. Are the Reapers now just gonna go and wipe out the Krogan? Mm-hmm. What if somebody develops another AI for the purpose of creating a slave race, and that slave race rebels? Are you gonna kill the slaves and the masters? Only the masters? Only the slaves? What if other people figured out, wait a minute, Shepard went into this crucible thingy and then became an uber god? Could we do the same? Or can we trust that this uber AI fusion Shepard thingy is going to do the right thing because it can? Maybe we don't. And we have ships and guns and missiles, and we should do something about it. And you end up with the cycle, same thing. So no solution, dumb solution, broken solution, right? And the sad thing about all of this is that the whole rigmarole with the Star Brat, right, with the Reaper AI, I suppose, the original Reaper AI. Oh, I didn't mention how, for example, when the Prothean scientists went back to the Citadel and reprogrammed the Citadel so that the Citadel wouldn't send you know, the other servant race that's enslaved in the Citadel uh, doesn't send a signal to the other Reapers to invade. We don't know what triggers that. I guess it might be just a countdown. That they never encountered the Reaper AI, the Star Child. And the Star Child didn't do anything to fight back or talk to Shepard in the master control room. Again, you know that this was created at the last minute, so yeah, right? So many holes in this. But the worst part of it is that all of that was unnecessary because it's supposed to be there as a way of explaining why the Reapers do what they do, but we already know what the Reapers do what they do. We are told by Sovereign, you exist, you will live because we allow it, and you will die because we demand it. You are what the Reapers are. They're the ultimate form of imperialism, right? The aggressive, predatory extraction of wealth resources for their own benefit, for the benefit of, I would only argue, we call the Reaper nation state or species. Right? They don't bargain, they don't manipulate markets, they don't deal with debt, they don't, they just go and reap, right? They have essentially conquered the galaxy already, and what they do is every 50,000 years, they just reap what they have sown and start over again. Under that rubric, yeah, it makes sense to have the cycle, right? Um, Not building just one Reaper, probably building multiple Reapers per cycle, maybe a handful just in case of big and small Reapers. But the cycle makes sense under that rubric. But on the preservation of species rubric, is the no. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like, oh dear God, why? Why are you doing this? So there's that. Okay. But again, something I've been dancing around up to this point is that the whole interaction is unnecessary. And my proof of it is what's called the happy ending mod. If you don't know what the happy ending mod, it was a mod released for the original version of the game, Mass Effect 3, and then later on in the Legendary Edition, you can find it over Nexus Mods. It basically cuts out the whole Star Child thing. Shepard presses a button, you get the red ending, and then it reworks some things afterwards to show that the Geth have lived, right? Also, let's talk about the Geth dying during the red ending. We're not really told. I guess the implication, and you really have to, well, fill in the blanks, not even read between the lines. You have to fill in the blanks and say, well, the reason why they get died because they have Reaper code, and the machine was designed to destroy all things Reaper or Reaper-like. Okay, we're not told that though. We're told that it's synthetic. not Reaper-like. Again, if you're building a weapon against the Reapers, you would just want to make sure the weapon works against the Reapers. You know, just so you know. Oh, by the way, this weapon was not developed by the Leviathans. They tell you straight up, well, we don't know where the weapon came from. You would think that in the intervening billion years or so, they would be working behind the scenes to create just such a weapon in order to defeat their longtime enemies and be able to return to being the apex civilization in the galaxy. You would think. But no, they didn't do it. Someone else did. We don't know. Apparently, it doesn't matter. Okay. The happy ending basically takes out the Star Child and turns a bad ending into a okay ending. Not even okay. I'll call it meh, right? It's a serviceable ending. It's like, okay, this is not great. It's not blowing my brains out, but it's functional, right? It's it's a thing because also the ending has a lot of more problems to it. The fact that you have to go down to Earth in London, the battle in London, the fact that it's not another battle in the Citadel, which makes more sense. The fact that especially in the extended cut, Sovereign, not Sovereign, that guy's dead. Harbinger shows up, blasts you with a beam after allowing the SR2 to land or close to landing, take out your crew, literally park itself between you and the Reaper. It's a warship. It just, Harbinger just patiently waits, like, yeah, okay, you done there? Oh, sure, whatever. Oh, you're gone. Oh, okay, I'm gonna keep blasting. Blasts Shepard, strips them nearly naked, takes all their powers, all their abilities, all the weapons except for the one gun they find somewhere. Then Marauder Shield happens, you shoot them. Then you get, set up the beam thing, and you show how horrible the Reapers are, right? All the carnage and all that stuff like that. Then you have the Elusive Man, the talk with Elusive Man, who has and this is quoted from TV tropes, last minute Atlas Charles Atlas superpower where they can literally control people remotely, which is something the Reapers don't do, because if they were able to do that, we know the Leviathans kind of sort of can do that, but not the Reapers. Did the Elusive Man discover admitting a missing executable file in the Reaper code that shows how the Leviathans would do that, and that's the technology that he's using? Why wouldn't the Reapers use that technology? You know what? I mean, let me put it this way: everything after the doors to the Elusive Man office open, that's when the whole thing goes south. At least it comes down a couple of notches, right? It's overlong, not, it seemed rushed, just sort of coupled together, right? But with the happy ending mod, you're like, okay, fine. At least you get your closure with your characters. You get to see the Geth living and all that. And talking about the Geth being killed, the reason I think the Geth get killed and Edie gets killed is not because it makes sense within the narrative, right? It's because they also, when you create something like a multiple, endings like this, see Deus Ex Human Revolution or just Deus Ex or many other games, Fable 2 had it as well. You have to create a situation, these designers feel that they have to create a situation where all the endings have some validity. But instead of making better arguments, right? This is good, this is better, this is the best, because of course, if you present it that way, well, all players want to win. They want to get the best ending, so they'll gravitate to the best ending, right? They'll ignore the others. You have to weigh down those endings. You have to have some pros, and you definitely have to have some cons. Now, if you have been someone who cares about Edie as a character and went out of your way to not kill the Geth, and even preserve both the Geth and the Quarrens, or just the Geth in case you are forced to choose between two of them, then, oh no, I'm not going to choose the red ending because I don't want those characters dying, which is completely meta and has nothing to do with the situation you're in story, right? It's, oh, I as a player don't want to see Edie die, so I'm going to choose an ending that preserves her, regardless of whether it makes sense or not, right? That's, again, bad writing. Then there's also the fact that these decisions seem to come out of nowhere. They contradict, as I said before, everything's come before. And finally, they're in the wrong place. Because the one thing that was never a decision up to this point was the fate of the Reapers, meaning what was going to happen to them. Either you kill the Reapers or the Reapers kill you. That's it. Pretty binary. All the decisions that your shepherd makes along the way in 3 games are there to put you in this spot so you can actually finish the job and kill the Reapers, defeat them or destroy them, drive them away, kill them all, etc. Introducing a new set of decisions at a moment where you already made all those decisions not only extends the story a bit too far, because there's always a point in a story, you should call the climax, where if you don't achieve that climax, you get the equivalent of narrative. You get the equivalent of narrative blue balls. If you don't get that release, you get pent up, essentially. And by adding these 3 choices when you're about to have your release, feels very much like a bad case of blue balls, right? Like you were supposed to, like, finally, we got it done. Like, no, wait, like, ouch. And it feels that painful. And by the way, I use this analogy because the term climax, it's a direct evocation to the sexual act. That's why it's there. It's a direct comparison to lovemaking or just sex, you know. So it's like, oh, I'm gonna, oh, ow, and it just feels that much painful, right? You already made all your decisions. This is the time to, pun intended, harvest those decisions and see what happens next, right? You already played the game. Now it's a matter of just seeing what happens next. But no, the game kicks you in the nuts and says, no, 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 no. You gotta stick it out just a little bit more, right? And then when you have the final release, it's pretty satisfactory. It's like, ouch. Uh, you might consider just for a moment abstaining from that kind of activity for some time to come because it's disappointing. I'm not going to talk about them flying, past the explosion or the beam or whatever, or, being able to solve everything with one single act. Those are problems created by other situations, other meta situations, like making promises you really can't keep, like saying definitely that this is going to be the ending of Shepard's story and announcing that publicly. Like, yeah, you can set up as a goal internally, but why are you making that statement publicly? You shouldn't. You shouldn't box yourself in, but they did, and so Also, that's a mission statement that it's one of those mission statements that should be subject to change. But as we know, that's not how BioWare works for the most part. So you have the extended cut, you have, all the things that happen, and you have your slides, right? Which tell you what happened to your companions and your love interest, if any. They lived, they died, etc. And that is where we get into the final piece of this trilogy of DLC, Citadel DLC. Because the extended cut was created as a reaction to the overall negative take on the ending. People were confused, people were angry, etc. There was a retake movement. I have to admit I was a part of that briefly. But then I realized that runs into its own problems, as in who owns what. I own my experience of playing the game and my copy, if I have a physical copy of the game, but I do not own the experience of creating the game. And that's a discussion. A discussion that I have to have with other people because it's, if I just talk to the mic like this, it's going to be incomplete. But it's an interesting one, and one that I think the retake movement sort of failed at. So I moved past that to a degree. But then the extended cut came in and said, "Oh, we're going to explain to people who are complaining about plot and premises and setups and payoffs and logic, reason, and consistency. We're just going to add a couple more things that would explain the ending to them because clearly they're not smart enough to get it. And failing on that, we're going to give other people these slides to make them happy." And of course, within the group of people that were there for the characters, people who, for example, I may be exaggerating a little bit, but just a little bit, who see Mass Effect not as what it is, a sci-fi third-person cover-based shooter with RPG elements, but as a space-based alien dating sim, uh, they get their slides and they were ecstatic. "Oh my God, thank you for fixing the ending, the problem they have with the ending. Now we have closure." BioWare saw that and said, "Aha, here we have an easily pleasable audience that if we give them, more lovey-dovey moments or chipping moments, they will absolutely adore us." And that's how you get to the Citadel DLC. What is the Citadel DLC? It's what we like to call professionally a fan job. Not a work of art done by the fans, but a work done by the creators of the franchise, specifically to satisfy specific aspects of the fandom. It's continuing my sexual analogy, I suppose. It's like getting a blowjob after getting blue balls. You know, you forget why you got the blue balls, and you focus on the release of the blowjob, oral sex. Like, "Oh, thank you, you gave me a release. Thank you for releasing me from my burden," right? And as expected, that was the take on it. The most popular takes, like, "Oh my God, Citadel DLC is the best thing ever," even though it isn't. Let's look at the Citadel. Let me repeat myself for clarity's sake. Let's look at the Citadel DLC in 3 parts. 1, the plot. 2, the premise. 3, the delivery. Let's start with the premise. The premise of the Citadel DLC, one that a lot of people confuse because, again, they introduce meta elements that are not there, is that this is a R&R, rest and recreation, or Rex and relaxation of Shepard in the middle of the war, due to the fact that then still living Admiral Anderson, former, um, either at someone who was helping the former ambassador Odina to the Citadel Council, or as Counselor Odina, or as Counselor himself, he got this nice apartment in a swanky area of the Citadel, a casino entertainment area, but he didn't really wanted it. It was just a place that he barely lived in, so he just gives it to Shepard, like, "Hey, it's yours now. Have at it." And Shepard decides to take a couple of days off with their friends and have a party. Now, that premise is broken, but it's easily fixable. Because if the Citadel DLC was a true ending DLC, like, say, like Arrival, for example, in Mass Effect 2, then you would have a situation where this happens after the events of Mass Effect 3. It doesn't. Let me repeat that. It doesn't. People assume it does, but it actually doesn't. This is not the true ending to Mass Effect 3. The true ending in Mass Effect 3, now with the Legendary Edition, is the extended cut. This happens before that. So it's not the true ending. Admiral Anderson has passed away. and you get, and the will is written, is read, and they bequeath to Shepard their apartment. Like, okay, they have that kind of close relationship, which is, considering, the relationship we see in throughout the games, it seems to be pretty close. And Anderson serves as a father figure to Shepard in multiple occasions, even at the end, very end. Um, calls Shepard either son or daughter, right, or child. You did good, son, or you did good, child, right? So that there's a paternal, we may even say paternalistic relationship between Shepard and Anderson. Anderson being the mentor, Shepard being, their protege. So you get the apartment, you get videos about Anderson, and since Anderson has passed away, it's like a memorial to Anderson, the character. That would have worked fine. Not a big deal. But then you get to the plot, such as it is, of Citadel DLC. It's funny, but not because it's funny. I'm laughing at it, not laughing with it. It's a plot line taken directly from the worst of the Silver Age DC comics. Literally, Shepard is fighting Bizarro Shepard, their clone, the most evil version of the writers come up with of Shepard, right? He's the most renegade, or they are the most renegade of Shepards. Regardless of whether your Shepard is Paragon or Renegade or anything in between, that's what you're facing, right? This is what a real Renegade looks like. Well, really, the actual villain is a character that we come to know as Maya Brooks, and their idea of doing all this thing to basically steal Shepard's life and identity and gift it or give it to the clone is because they want to do what Cerberus is doing in the middle of a war, no less, but they want to do it their own way. Now, again, if you have time shifted, so there was like 6 months later after the end of Mass Effect 3 and gave Maya Brooks, to quote the Elusive Man, which says you cannot kill an idea, then you can say, okay, her plan might be a bit kooky, but overall, she's trying to use, Shepard's heroic position as the savior of the galaxy, champion of the Citadel, killer of the collectors and all that. It's the Shepard, right? To kickstart Cerberus in a galaxy that is, has a lot of power vacuums. That makes a lot more sense than just trying to do this in the middle of a war against the Reapers, no less. Without the backing of the Citadel Council or the Alliance or any of the allies, who quickly going to realize, yeah, this guy is not it, right? Mostly because their companions know that that's not Shepard, and so or quickly figure it out, right? So it's like, oh yeah, that's the thing that happened. So and it's just sort of like this chase, and you fight it again. It's part of the job aspect of the fan job, right? Um, in that essentially the message is only Shepard can fight Shepard. The Reapers, nah. It's like Shepard is so important, meaning you, the player, because Shepard is your player character. You are so important. Only another you can fight you, right? And it takes all the cliches of a clone plot line, such as the one clone has to kill the original because reasons. Again, it would have been like Leviathan DLC would have been a perfect place to show aspects of Shepard, which sadly the games rarely touch upon, right? Shepard as a character, as a standing character of its own, based on the decisions that you as a player character have made on the games. There's always that thing where Shepard is 2/3 complete, but there's always a missing element. And that missing element is supposed to be filled in by the player character role playing as Shepard, but somehow the game never truly pulls it off. There's always that space that it's left open because the writers simply did not say, okay, this is what Shepard would do based on this and this and this, right? They couldn't pull it off. I mean, nobody's perfect, but there it is. Again, this could have been a great example. I mean, it's not like William Riker, meaning his clone, his clone in TNG or something like that. That was a much better clone storyline. There's a lot of ways of doing a good clone storyline. Stargate Atlantis did a good clone storyline as well. Um, this is not it. This is literally Shepard fighting Bizarro Shepard. Shepard as Superman, right? Fighting his broken Bizarro clone, right? Bizarro. I mean, I almost expected Clone Shepard to go like Bizarro, Bizarro, right? Because reasons. So that's dumb. Badly executed. Has some action sequences. It has a sort of a forced stealth section. Well, kind of forced. Like you could do things stealthily, somewhat, but not really. So, and then you have the party. The party itself is fine. Again, especially if you frame it under we're celebrating the fact that we survived this war, right? And we're gonna bring everybody together. And also would be very cool if, you know, we get to see how the lives of these characters have, and those who are still around for whatever reason have survived, have gone through. I mean, it would have taken the slides that we see in the end of the extended cut and sort of, fictionalize them and make them come alive. But that's not what happens because, again, this DLC was not created to be a true post-ending DLC. It happens within the framework of DLC. Then you have the dates. And many of these dates, first of all the dates are extremely short, right? Like woefully short. It's like, oh, hey, this is happening. Okay, wait a minute, blah, blah, you're done. Second, again, because it seems that the writers just took whatever, the top 100 fanfics per pairing in AO3 and in fanfiction.net. It's like, oh, so this is what people like. Okay, let's just put it in the game and write stuff around them. They took one or two characteristics of the character, especially once introduced later into the games, like Mass Effect 3, like horny Uncle Rex. They took that to the extreme. Or they took that time when Ashley got drunk and just made her just getting drunk every single time because now she's just a walking drunk. She's an raging alcoholic. Or Garrus's being shy around FemChep, but if you play BroChep, MChep, he then just shy around all women. The two times that he's shy is not because he lacks confidence. One is because when he's romancing FemChep, he genuinely doesn't want to mess it up. And the time when he hook up with Tally, it's because they got caught. And so both of them are embarrassed, right? But once the embarrassment passes, they just, both of them quickly recover and say some, quippy lines, right? It's like, okay. So again, it's that trend of fandom to take one aspect of the story or the plot or a situation or a character and just stretch it to make it the entirety of the situation, right? And that's exactly what the writers do, right? And of course, because that's something that already set up as fandom, expectation, they fulfill that expectation, and the fans are like, oh, thank you for the release, right? They try to be funny, and at least to me, they miss the mark most of the time. They try so hard, like, haha, are you laughing now? Are you winning, son? Haha. They're like, eh. In fact, the dates that worked for me are the ones that don't try to do that. They just are sort of sincere, cute moments where they're like, okay, we have these characters just talking and sharing a moment, regardless of whether they're in a romance or not, right? Oh, and also the DLC tries to, again, play to the shippers by adding more romance options, which, by the way, we never see again. They just only happen in Citadel DLC. And some of them are borderline disgusting, like your superior sexually harassing you, or having your would-be love interest rolling out of bed and treating you like a 2 credit whore. Javik. Yeah, that's how much respect the writers have, particularly to FemChap. Yeah, and the chippers, right? So Citadel DLC is actually not good at all, or barely so. It has its moments, but if we were to ratio it, I would say the 3-to-1. For every good thing, there's like, yeah, this is okay to good. There's like 3 things, like the whole Blasto thing. Like they took a joke that was a side joke, which was funny as a side joke, as a background element, and they fictionalized it and just took out the entirety of the fun out of it. Like, I mean, that was painful. I watched it, I participated in it, and I'm like, what? I was waiting for literally having a cue in laughter, like have like canned laughter, like ha 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 ha, ha, and people clapping in the back. It's like, oh, I was supposed to laugh at that. Oh, okay, sure. Let's move on. The apartment looks nice, though. I like it as a space, a good spatial level design. I like that. Um, and that's it. But the problem with the Citadel DLC is that it's a fan job. And here's the thing: the the problem is not with the DLC itself; it's the expectations it sets up in the future. Let's look what happened with Andromeda, just to bring Andromeda into it. Andromeda wasn't horrible. My characterization of Andromeda is again, meh. But you can see that we're trying to paper over some of the weaknesses of Andromeda by having a very large crew that was kind of imitating the original crew to a degree, right? Or original crews, and having a lot of love interest. So, oh, hey, the problem with facial animation, don't worry about it. You can romance this new alien. And oh, by the way, we're going to go back and rewrite that alien to make it omnisexual. I mean, to be fair, it's an alien. So the alien doesn't have to have the same ideas about sexuality that you or I do, right? Not to say that people or humans cannot be pansexual and the like. So both things can be true. But the fact that they had to go back and make that change, but they essentially abandoned the game after a while, which is now the game is dead. It's lack support. I think they're still supporting the multiplayer. Says a lot. Of priorities. Essentially, and here's the thing: when you bring this all together, 2 things. At least on the Mass Effect side of things, BioWare will not, in fact, listen to criticism. What they will do is they will do 2 things. They will double down on whatever it is that they were doing. They'll literally create entire DLCs to double, triple, and quadruple down on their mistakes because they don't want to admit they made a mistake. And when that fails, they'll do a fan job. That is, they'll make a direct appeal to a subsection of the audience, very vocal one, but still a subsection, and deliberately ignore everyone else. And if you don't believe me about ignoring everyone else, let's go back to a little bit to the extended cut. And this is going to be my final thought on it. In the extended cut, you're giving a 4th choice, boys and girls. The 3 original choices and a new one. Like, wow, what's the new one? The new one is that you reject the whole 3 choice thing, right? Does that mean we actually can just win conventionally? It's a hard fight, but you win the game, etc. No. What really means, and I'm going by what SF Debris, Sci-Fi Debris, wrote about in his essay about the subject. You check their channel; it's wonderful. sfdebris.com, or in the same channel, Red and Blue over at YouTube. According to him and his sources, and I have no reason to distrust them, but I will tell you that I'm taking that from him, just so you know. If you have counter information, you can put in the comments below in the chat, etc. Please do so, because I want to make sure the record is clear. But according to his sources, not only does the kid walk away and you lose the game, what you see in the extended cut, not only are you told that the next cycle wins the war against the Reapers due to information that Liara left in these black boxes for future generations. So again, the game wins itself. You lose, but the game wins itself because you're not going to start a new game with the new generation of etc., right? The new generation of etc. That's a phrase. But the way the new generation wins the war is that they build the crucible and they made one of those choices. In other words, there was never any other option than to choose green, blue, or red. We're not told what choice they make. It doesn't really matter, but they made a choice and they won. So the game flips you the metaphorical bird. It wins itself, and the way it wins itself is by doing exactly what you were supposed to do in the first place, what you refused to do. So you're giving a choice that's a non-choice in so many layers of two words. The first one starts with F and the last one ends with U kind of feeling to it. What does that say about BioWare and the relationship with its audience, consumers, and players of their games? Not good. Now, it might be as a reaction to they felt that they were under attack and they're trolling back. But it also says something about the future of the franchise. There's a lot of speculation that they're working on a new Mass Effect. Well, there might be a new Mass Effect if EA either remains an independent company or sold to a third party, and that third party doesn't close BioWare's doors, which is always a possibility. So if we do get a Mass Effect 3 or 4 or 5, you count Andromeda as a member of the Mass Effect franchise, which, by the way, right now is non-canonical because they could have added references to the events of Mass Effect Andromeda, at least the launching of the initiative or the existence of the initiative in Mass Effect 3 or any of the Mass Effects, and they didn't do it, even though we know, according to Andromeda, that Liara knew about the initiative, but she never mentioned it to Shepard for some reason. And Shepard was too busy making, color choices, color palette choices, that is. And thus, we end up with a situation where what are they going to do? I mean, there's a host of problems. The fact that the stakes will not be as high because the Reapers are no longer there. There's a lot of people say, oh, bring back Shepard. It's like, why? I mean, again, the intended purpose was to have Mass Effect 3 be the ending of Shepard's story. So much so when they made the next game, they made it with other characters in another galaxy and 600 years removed from the events of the original games. Although they also kept referring back to the original games for a reason that, again, is more of a fan job than anything else. So there's that. To be honest, right now, I don't trust the Mass Effect side of BioWare to make a game. That will not be a complete crap show. And also, I'm afraid that a lot of people in the industry are still looking at these events, or the original, and then the especially now that the Legendary Edition sold well, and they'll say, "Oh well, it doesn't matter. It's always going to blow up. We can do whatever we want," and lead them to repeat the same mistakes. And when people discuss those mistakes to then double down on them or triple down or quadruple down because reasons. It's not a good precedent for the industry. And the industry is riddled with problems already, especially abuse of their employees. No, let me rephrase that. Exploitation and abuse of their employees. And a complete disregard and disrespect for many members of the audience on multiple levels, and none of the gamers trademark type members of the audience. Although sometimes they also get their slaps on the face as well. So there's that. So that is my conclusion to all this. Wishing for the best, but preparing for the worst. When people are very optimistic about this stuff and get very excited, I'm like, we shall see. And because this channel is called Lessons Learned, I hope that people watch this and go, instead of simply seeing an overly negative take on things, that I manage somehow to transmit my ideas as clearly as possible, and that, yes, some lessons can be extracted, can be learned from this situation. So thank you already for coming. We will continue with regular streaming probably next week. More Command and Conquer. Heck, I might even go back to Andromeda. I don't know. And just do what I want and have fun. And you're always invited to join me to have fun. And also go over to my YouTube channel when I'm doing more stuff there. We're trying to anyway. And between it, also check our Patreon, which is down below. If you want to support the channel, the best way to do is through Patreon or bits or follows and everything else. So thank you already for coming. And as always, we'll see you when we see you. Bye-bye, everybody.